in this video we're going to finish the 7.11 lesson. This will be part 2. So we were in the midst of our reading, so let's go back to where we were. And we had finished up this first column, and we're going to start the second column, Immigrants from Beyond Europe. Not all the new immigrants to the United States came from Europe. The century of immigration also saw a surge in newcomers from China and Japan. The Chinese and Japanese differed from other immigrant groups in two important ways. They came across the Pacific Ocean to the west coast rather than across the Atlantic to the eastern cities, and their Asian origins made them especially subject to discrimination. About 300,000 Chinese arrived in America between 1848 and 1882. Among the first people who came to seek wealth in the 1849 California gold rush were 325 arrivals from China. They were pulled by the hope of striking it rich and pushed by the political unrest and poverty at home. Thousands more, almost all men, soon followed. When the mining boom ended, many Chinese immigrants remained in the West, where they became railroad workers and helped build the first transcontinental lines in the 1860s. Chinese immigrants often took jobs that many native-born whites did not want, such as laying railroad tracks, mining, cooking, and doing laundry at mining camps. The hard-working immigrants were often feared as outsiders competing for scarce jobs, and bloody riots sometimes broke out, with white workers attacking the Chinese. The immigrants responded by building tight-knit communities, community organizations, and pooling money to help each other start businesses. The hub of their community was the several tightly packed blocks of San Francisco known as Chinatown. Japanese immigrants began coming to the United States in significant numbers in the 1890s. Before that, many Japanese had left their country for Hawaii, where they became agricultural workers. When the United States annexed Hawaii in 1898, the Japanese began migrating to the American mainland in search for new opportunities. Compared to Chinese immigrants, many Japanese brought more startup capital with which to establish farms and stores. Nevertheless, because of their Asian origins and their different customs, they suffered, like the Chinese, from widespread discrimination. In addition to the immigrants from Europe and Asia, some 750,000 Mexicans came to the United States in the early decades of the 20th century. At the close, I lost my place. At the close of the Mexican-American War in 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo had turned thousands of Mexican citizens into residents of the United States. Other Mexicans headed north in search of agricultural work, especially after a revolution in 1909 led to economic and political disruption at home. Ports of arrival. Most immigrants first stepped onto American soil at one of three locations: Castle Garden or Ellis Island in New York, or Angel Island in San Francisco. These were processing centers where government officials collected information about the immigrants and decided if they qualified to enter the United States. Castle Garden, an old stone fortress in Manhattan Island, New York, was the country's first official immigration center. Between 1855 and 1890, more than 8 million people entered the United States through this facility, but Castle Garden could not accommodate the large numbers arriving by the late 19th century. In 1892, the federal government opened a new facility at Ellis Island in New York Harbor. Over the next 40 years, some 12 million immigrants were processed at Ellis Island. About another 5 million immigrants, mainly those traveling first and second class and presumed to be suitable for entry, were quickly examined on board their ships and allowed to enter the country without going through processing on the island. For many immigrants, the first glimpse of America was the Statue of Liberty, which stood a short distance away in the New York harbor. Emerging from dank and crowded steerage compartments deep in the hulls of their ships, immigrants, sometimes thousands per day, gathered their few belongings and traveled by ferry to the great receiving hall on Ellis Island. There, immigration agents gave them a physical examination and recorded their age, nationality, and marital status. Sometimes agents would shorten or simplify foreign names they found too difficult to spell. Immigrants could feel lost and confused at Ellis Island. One woman arriving from Russia in 1911 recalled, "We had no idea where we were going and no idea what was to be done to us. There were hundreds of people and they were treated exactly like sheep." Most immigrants left Ellis Island the same day they arrived. Limited lodging and food were provided for those who had to stay overnight, as well as a hospital on the island for those too ill to proceed. Most immigrants processed at Ellis Island were granted admission to the United States. Ellis Island became known as the Island of Hope, though for those who were turned back, it was an island of tears. In 1880, An 1891 law required immigration agents to reject anyone who had been convicted of a serious crime, as well as the insane and people with contagious diseases. Perello LaGuardia, a native-born American who worked as an interpreter at Ellis Island and later became one of New York City's most successful mayors, recalled that many immigrants were excluded because they suffered from a serious eye disease called trachoma. Sometimes, said LaGuardia, if it was a young child who suffered from trachoma, one of the parents had to return to their native country with the rejected member of the family. When they learned their fate, they were stunned. But for the great majority, Ellis Island proved a brief stopover on the way to a new life in America. Could you imagine that? I'm just like almost makes me want to cry just listening to that or reading that. I can't imagine the despair that would strike a family if something like that was to happen. The West Coast equivalent of Ellis Island was Angel Island on San Francisco Bay. It operated from 1910 until 1940. Unlike Ellis Island, where officials attempted to process millions of European immigrants with minimal interference, Angel Island was a far less welcoming place. Reflecting on the widespread bias against Chinese and Japanese citizens, the Angel Island staff sought to reject as many potential immigrants as possible. More than 175,000 Chinese immigrants passed through the island. Most had remained there for 2 to 3 weeks, and many returned back. Many of the temporary residents of Angel Island scratched poems and messages on the walls of the fortress as a record of the anxiety and anguish. One immigrant wrote, "I used to admire the land of the flowery flag as a country of abundance. I merely raised money and started my journey. For over a month I have experienced wind and waves. I look up and see Oakland so close by. Discontent fills my belly, and it is difficult for me to sleep. I just write these lines to express what is on my mind." And there's a picture of a mother and children arrive at Ellis Island, New York Harbor. And look at what they're carrying. I mean, that's their worldly possessions. There might be a a trunk or something that their father was carrying, but they really came with very, very little. You had to, all your worldly possessions and basically what you could carry. I mean, could you imagine doing that? I bet you probably couldn't even pack your bedrooms at home in one trunk or one suitcase, let alone all your worldly possessions and move to a brand new country. I'm filled with respect and awe for these immigrants that gave up so much to start over in a new land. Okay, oh, that's the end for this reading. For this lesson, we would stop on page 531. So that was the end there. Let's go back to the lesson. The next thing we have to do then is the field trip Ellis Island. Okay, and there's the lesson resources. You can get the sheet for that. And it's these two websites that you are to go through. Ellis Island became known as the Island of Hope to the millions of immigrants who left their homelands in search of a better life in America. The U.S. government opened the first Ellis Island immigration station on January 1st, 1892, to accommodate the increasing number of immigrants coming to its shores. The first immigrant to pass through Ellis Island was Annie Moore, a 15-year-old rosy-cheeked Irish girl from County Cork, Ireland. And then it says, complete the field trip Ellis Island sheet to answer some graph-based questions and learn about how one American researched her ancestry. You will need the following websites. And these will take you to two different websites. One is the Statue of Liberty in Ellis Island, a timeline, and the other one is Ellis Island Family Histories. And it has several different stories from people that emigrated to Ellis Island here. The questions on the sheet, however, I found they don't match up entirely. I'm assuming these websites have been updated since the original assignment was made. So if you have some difficulty answering a few of those questions on the Ellis Island sheet, don't be afraid to use the lesson answer key to answer those and fill them out. I mean, that's okay. We can't always control websites being updated, so it's okay to use the lesson answer key provided to help you fill out the virtual field trip Ellis Island sheet. Okay, and then at the end, make sure you complete your 7.11 checkpoint. You can use your completed reading guide on that checkpoint, and then you are done with today's lesson once you've completed that checkpoint. Good luck on everything, as always.